There is a romantic idea about heading out onto the open ocean. It offers a kind of absolute solitude you cannot find on land. But that peace relies entirely on the assumption that you are alone. When the fog rolls in and that silence is invaded, the isolation turns into a weapon. Daniel was fishing 12 miles off the coast when his engine cut out. No warning light, no sputtering. His boat sat dead in the water, wrapped in a fog bank that arrived far faster than the forecast predicted. He reached for the radio and heard only static. Then a faint, broken human voice began pushing through the dead channel. 12 miles from the coastline feels close enough to civilization to be safe, but without power, distance is irrelevant. You are at the mercy of the current, and the water belongs to whatever is moving in the deep. The voice on the radio spoke again, clearer this time. Taking on water. Tell my wife I tried. Simultaneously, Daniel's flashlight caught a dark shape beneath the surface, moving deliberately against the ocean current. Daniel survived that night, but the encounter stayed with him. He later searched the historical records and found a vessel called the Whitfield. It sank in those exact coordinates on that exact date 40 years ago. These trapped radio waves represent a rare atmospheric phenomenon where signals bounce between a flat ocean surface and a low cloud layer. In this environment, a vessel's final broadcast can theoretically loop for decades. When Daniel examined the Whitfield sinking transcript, he looked at the captain's final logged broadcast. It was a single, unfinished sentence. Tell my wife I tried. Daniel heard an echo of a tragedy that remained in the water. But out in the deep ocean, sailors sometimes encounter forces that refuse to stay on the outside of the hull. During a solo Atlantic crossing, the boat stops being a vehicle and becomes a protective shell, an extension of the sailor's own body. 7 nights out from Portugal, Priya was deep into her crossing. That night, she clearly heard the heavy sound of bare feet crossing the deck planks directly above her cabin. On a solo voyage, the sound of a footstep is a violation. The boat is a sanctuary surrounded by 2,000 miles of water. If someone else is on that deck, there is nowhere to run. The pacing continued for 2 nights. On the 9th, Priya climbed the stairs with a flashlight. The deck was empty, but her beam caught a single human-sized wet footprint still evaporating in the cold air. In the deep ocean, the boundary between the living and the dead collapses into physical proof. At dawn, Priya spotted a barnacle-encrusted life raft drifting 50 yards off her port side. The Coast Guard traced the raft's serial number to a solo sailor who had vanished 4 years earlier. There was no wreckage, no mayday call, and no remains. These vector currents mark oceanic convergence zones, isolated corridors where drifting objects rotate through the same stretch of water for years. Priya still sails, but she now leaves a pair of shoes facing her cabin stairs, an old superstition meant to convince wandering spirits that the deck is already occupied. The vast, deep ocean holds these final moments in a perpetual drifting cycle, one that living sailors occasionally cross into. We assume that surviving the ocean means returning to the safety of land. We tell ourselves that once a ship is bolted to solid ground, the maritime threats end. The Halcyon was a car ferry that had been sitting motionless in dry dock for 11 years. A salvage worker named Marcus was stripping the interior when he reached the lower decks. He found cabin 7, a room that had been inexplicably welded shut for over a decade. Marcus cut through the welds and found a perfectly made bed. On the desk was a swollen logbook. The final entry, dated 11 years prior, read, "She's still knocking. I've stopped answering." Marcus found that moving the Halcyon to land hadn't changed the environment inside cabin 7. Whatever was knocking against the door remained there, regardless of where the ship was docked. Marcus never found out who she was, but later that night, in his dockside trailer, he heard 3 slow, patient knocks against his own wall. A knock is a direct demand for attention. It's a signal from something willing to wait as long as it takes for an answer. The salvage crew refused to scrap the cabin. Instead, the foreman ordered the heavy steel door of cabin 7 to be dropped into a pit and buried under 6 feet of gravel. The ocean is a vast graveyard, and the echoes of its tragedies refuse to stay buried. They actively demand acknowledgement from anyone who uncovers them. Marcus never opened his door that night. But if he had, who or what would have been standing there?